Okay, it feels we've spent a lot of time doing the foundations of our application, and if we take a look at our entities as it stands, well, we've got an app user with a meager 4 properties, and we don't actually have anything else. Now, the entities are like our building blocks of our application, but what we've really been doing is laying the foundations, and now we start to accelerate what we're actually building by adding more entities and creating the features that we're going to add in our application. And we're going to start by extending this guy, the app user. We're going to add more properties that we want to collect from the user, and also additional related entities, as we're going to talk about relations as well in this section between our database tables. But first of all, let's take a look at what we're going to do inside this class and how we're going to extend it. Now, we need to take a bit of care here, because when we do, and in this section as well, we're going to look at seeding data into our database. Now, when we use this required property in the password hash and password salt, we had control over when we were creating the user objects. And if I go to our account controller, just to emphasize what I'm talking about here, that required property works when we are creating a new app user in this way, as when we create this new object, we also have the opportunity to create the password hash and the password salt. And if I forget to add one of these, then we get a complaint from the app user. That's fine, that's the desired behavior that we want. However, we're going to be creating our users when it comes to seeding our users in a different way. So we're going to effectively create the new app user object, and after it has been created, then we're going to create these 2 properties. What that means is that this required modifier here for the password hash and the password salt, that's going to give us a problem if we try and use it in the same way. So we're going to take a different approach for these 2 properties, and I'm going to remove the required, and of course the compiler is going to complain, but instead, for this occasion, we're going to initialize them with empty arrays, and I need to close that line with a semicolon. So we need that for what we're going to be doing in this section. And sure, technically it's possible by doing this, that it is possible to get an empty password hash and salt in our database. I'm not concerned about that because this is not a long-term solution to passwords in our application. So we're going to create some additional properties inside our app user, and we're going to take the user's date of birth, and the appropriate property type that we'll use for this is date only. We just need to store the user's date of birth, and we'll give it a name of date of birth. We'll also create a string for their known as, and this one we're going to say is required, and we're going to want to take that information from the user when we create their user account. We'll also have a couple of date time properties. We're going to have one for created, as in when was this user account created, and we're going to give it a default value of datetime.utc. Now, please stick with UTC now dates. We're going to talk about dates a bit later because SQLite does not have the ability to use UTC dates. It just doesn't have that capacity, and they've got no intention to add that capacity. But other database technologies like Postgres, for instance, well, that requires UTC dates. So we'll stick with using UTC because it does make it easier from the client side of things as well, because the client will always convert, or the client browser I should say, will always convert a UTC date into local time. And we'll create another prop, date time, and for last active, when the user was last active, and somehow I missed off the UTC now from there. And we'll do the same for this as well. When the account is created, we'll give it a default value of UTC now. We'll also add another string to take the gender, and again this one is going to be required. And then we'll add a string for the introduction, and this one we're going to make optional. We're not going to ask the user to provide this information when they first register. And we'll do the same for the next property. We'll say string, make it optional, and say interests. And we'll add another prop that's going to be a string, again optional, and say looking for. And then we'll add another string for the city, and we will take this one when they register, so we'll set that to required, and we'll add another prop that is a string for the country, and again we'll make this required as well. And then finally we'll add another prop, and this is going to be a list of photo, and we'll call it photos. And we'll set this to an empty array as well for its initial value. Now we don't have this yet, so we'll need to create this one. So I'm just going to say, or put my cursor inside the photo and say generate class photo, and that creates it inside here. And let's add the quick fix again and move type to photo.cs. And inside the entities folder, we now have a photo class. And okay, thanks VS Code. I don't know what that is. I'm going to ignore it and close it down. But I've got an error in my account controller for some reason that I obviously need to go and take a look at, but I'll come back to that soon. So we've got our photo class, and this one does give it the correct namespace. Like I say, every other tool that we use will always give it the namespace of the folder that it's created in, apart from that C# dev kit. And we'll give our photo class some properties as well. We'll give it an int for its ID, and that of course means that's going to be the primary key in our database. We'll give it another prop that's a string for the URL, and we're going to make this one required. We'll create a boolean, so public bool, and we'll say is main, to specify if this is the user's main image, and we'll have another string, and this one we'll utilize later, which is going to be for the public ID. The storage, where we're going to store the user photos, that's going to be on a cloud provider, and we'll get a public ID for that image. We don't have it yet, nor do we have the capability to add that yet, so this one can be optional as well. And let's see what I did inside the account controller. Of course, I changed something. And of course, now that we've added required properties inside our app user, things like the known as, then this gives us an issue with our register method inside our account controller. And we're not ready for this yet because of the nature of the changes we're making. So I'm actually going to comment out most of this method because I don't want to adjust lists to accommodate the changes that we've made in our app user yet. I want to come back to this later. So for this one, to remove the warnings and the error, I'm just going to comment out all of the code, and below the if statement here, I'm just going to say return OK. Just to remove the warnings, as we're not ready to deal with this yet. Now another thing we want to do when we return the data to the client, we want to return their age rather than the date of birth, and we'll take a look at how we can do that next.